Hello and welcome to Critic Reviews. This week on our show we'll be going back to 2011 and looking at an episode that I've liked for a while. Ever since I watched it in fact, and learned who the author of this episode was. The famous as ever M.A. Larson, who wrote episodes like Magic Duel and Cutie-Mark Chronicles. What works for this episode is that it was the first Rainbow Dash episode. It lends some depth to her character. She's not just this braggy, self-centered prick that everyone thought she was. And hey, I'll be honest, I hated Rainbow Dash when I started watching the series. She was just the opposite of me. I don't brag excessively about my accomplishments, so Dashi was just one of the least relatable characters for me. Which is actually one of the main things I look for in a character. Relatability. If I can't relate to a character, it's not as if I see nothing to like about them, it's just that there are characters out there I consider to be better in my book. So let's talk about my favourite part of the episode, the opening scene and the scene that follows it in the library. Since My Little Pony is a show for little kids who, as an almost permanent rule, have a very low attention span, the writers have to have the ability to allow the viewer to jump into the show at a moment's notice. Now how do you do that without hurting the enjoyability of the series? Genius writing by our ever-loved writer and brony troll extravagant, M.A. Larson. So what does this scene do right? You guessed it. It establishes all of the characters and their roles in this little ragtag group of ponies. Twilight is the magical, studious one, Rarity is the generous one, Pinkie is the hyperactive one who makes everyone laugh, with some obvious exceptions. Applejack is the one who's never afraid to speak her mind, Rainbow Dash is the athletic bragger, and Fluttershy is, well, the soft-spoken shy one. It's in her name, so it's hard to miss anyway. We can see that Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash still haven't really gotten accustomed to dealing with each other yet, as they're probably on opposite ends of the confidence spectrum. A rather interesting pairing if you ask me. That I'd be all for seeing more of in Season 5 for sure. This episode does, however, have its faults, as do all episodes. This episode's representation of Rarity is not one of them. In the beginning, she volunteers to assist Rainbow Dash and cheer her on to win the competition. But to those who have been in a situation like this, I haven't, so I don't know how it feels, but it can be all too easy to be swept up in the excitement of the situation, just as the main five were in Pinkie Pride. Rarity just loved all the attention she was getting and didn't want it to stop, so she wasn't really thinking straight when the whole thing happened. Rarity to me is not a perfect character. She has flaws, and this is one of them. The Rarity herself wasn't entirely at fault here. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She was really just doing what made her happy. It just so happened that what made her happy at the time was also what would have made Rainbow Dash happy. And if Rainbow Dash isn't happy, the audience isn't happy. But you know who is happy about all this? So, another thing this episode has going for it, aside from the awesome setup for Cutie-Mark Chronicles, which is also written by M.A. Larson by the way, it introduces a little micro-narrative for Rainbow Dash which carries over the two episodes. A small detail, but it's very interesting when you do notice it. That, however, was not the point I was going for. What I think is great about this episode is that it's our first look at the city of Cloudsdale. We get to see what Pegasi civilization is like. The architecture of their buildings, which unsurprisingly seems to be Greek in appearance, the process of creating weather, and the source of one of the Brony fandom's most beloved fanfictions. Another point of this episode I heavily enjoyed is the animation during the Sonic Rainboom sequence. Not only that, but the dual moral at the end of the episode. Not only did Rarity learn to control herself so that she doesn't end up hurting her friends again, but Rainbow Dash learned to believe in herself in the face of doubt. Both morals are interesting and relatable, but neither overshadow the other, which to me is very awesome. Following on from that, the idea that the rainbows were too spicy for Pinkie Pie plays off of the Season 1 premiere in which Pinkie eats a cupcake covered in hot sauce. A small reference, but as with all subtle references, makes the episode that much better. So, Sonic Rainboom is a fantastic episode. There are barely any flaws in this episode's execution, and just overall it's just entertaining. But there are flaws. For the sake of balance, I'm going to point out a few flaws now. Okay, you know what, screw this. This episode is perfect, 10 out of 10 would watch again. That's my review of Sonic Rainboom. I'm the Ponyville Critic. Thanks for watching.
Now a rainbow's tale isn't quite as nice as the story we knew of sugar and spice. But a rainbow's easy once you get to know